welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone, episode number 187 for the 19th of May, 2012. And almost over my cold, Richard Saunders here with you from another sunny day in Sydney, Australia. And I say another sunny day because it's been something like 24, 25 days now in a row where we haven't had a drop of rain in Sydney, and it's making the news. New record set. Well, it's very good for drying the clothes, I must say. On this week's show, we delve into the world, well, a little bit of strange, mysterious monsters and animals. Kicking off with Penny Chan with a penny for your thoughts. No, Penny is not a strange, mysterious monster or animal, I hope. But she's going to bring us Benjamin Radford in conversation with Brian Dunning at the University of California at Irvine. Just recently. Now, Benjamin Radford is a very famous monster investigator. Brian Dunning is a very famous guy. I'm sure he does something famous. I'm sure, somewhere along the line. Anyway, Brian sits down with Benjamin Radford to chat about monster investigations. And speaking of monsters and strange things, of course, this leads on to our next story, which is Maynard's Spooky Action. Maynard chats to Lee Harvey, who has had a first-hand experience in watching a black leopard in the Australian countryside. Well, for years we've heard reports about large, feral, exotic cats in Australia. One's never been caught, but there are sightings. Maynard talks to Lee Harvey, who says he saw one. And following that, Maynard will chat to Peter Bowditch from rutbags.com for a more, sceptical point of view about large cats in Australia. And to round off the show this week, we have The Think Tank. A small but merry think tank this week with Dr Rachael Bastard Sheep, James that is, and myself running down to our favourite club at the end of the street to chat about issues of the week, mostly revolving around, once again, vaccination. And speaking of vaccination and vaccination issues, folks, let me encourage you to go to www.skepticzone.tv, click on the show notes for this episode number 187. You will see a link to the Catalyst science TV show here in Australia, where a few days ago they ran the story called Danger Zones about the importance of vaccination. Now, the video of their report is on their website, and a transcript of the entire episode. I encourage you, I really do, I encourage you to watch the video or read the transcript, and then spend some time reading the comments, because, oh yes, the flying monkeys, as we call them, the rabid anti-vaccination crowd has bombarded the comment section on the Catalyst website with their rantings, including, why don't people use homeopathic vaccination? I wish there was a sound effect for head desk. Hang on, I'm actually really going to hit my head on the desk. Just stand by. Ow! Yep. There you are, folks. That's a real head desker. Please go and have a look at that page, or you can simply Google Catalyst ABC TV, and that will get you to their website. I'll have a few more little announcements to make at the end of the show, but let's get into this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone while I run down and have the last of my chicken soup to see off this cold once and for all. I'll let you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
here's Penny Chan with a penny for your thoughts.
Ben Radford is Deputy Director and columnist for Skeptical Inquirer and co-host of Skeptic Magazine's official podcast, Monster Talk. He's also author of several books on myths, monsters, and unexplained mysteries. In March, he traveled from his home in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to give a talk in Fullerton, California. The next day, he stopped in Irvine to visit the OC Science Club. The following is Ben Radford in conversation with Brian Dunning, recorded in front of a live audience in the Anthill Bar at UC Irvine.
I'm Brian Dunning from Skeptoid.com, and this is Ben Radford from BenRadford.com. Okay, so we're here with Ben Radford in Irvine, California at the Anthill Pub and Grill. This is one of our Science and Suds nights for the OC, what are we called now? The OC Science Club, or something like that. So Ben is visiting us from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I believe that's the correct pronunciation.
Albuquerque is correct.
Thank you.
It's actually sort of it's a blend of Spanish and Portuguese. You did very well.
Thank you. Yeah, I work on my foreign pronunciation all the time. So Ben is here, and we're going to basically ask Ben some questions about his current projects, what he's doing in town, and so forth. Ben, what exactly are you doing in town here tonight?
Actually, I just got done giving two talks at Fullerton College for a local teacher there, and it was for a critical thinking course, and I was, for whatever reason, invited to come and speak. Actually, I do know why. It's because one of my books called Media Mythmakers is being used as one of their texts, and I was given the opportunity to come out and see beautiful California and spread some of my skepticism, so it was nice.
So, Ben, you are one of the editors of Skeptical Inquirer magazine. Is that what you're best known for?
Yeah, I'm actually deputy editor, which is sort of the second banana. The main editor is Ken Frazier, and he also lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is kind of weird because the two main operators for Skeptical Inquirer are in Albuquerque, or whatever, however the hell you pronounced it earlier. And the rest of them live in Buffalo, New York, and so it's we have this sort of weird thing where the main staff is there, and then we sort of do the editorial back in Buffalo. So that's what I'm mainly known for in terms of editorial. Beyond that, it's probably like my investigations and the chupacabra and weird things like that.
What is Skeptical Inquirer magazine, and what do you do as deputy editor?
Skeptical Inquirer is the publication it's basically the official publication of what was formerly known as the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. There you go. Which is it's a nonprofit educational organization that has since been renamed the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, or CSI.
When I first started doing the Skeptoid podcast, which was about 5.5 years ago, I was completely new to the scene, and your name was one of the names that always came up whenever I'd Google search to do research and things like that. So obviously you've been around longer than I have. What is your specialty? Do you have a particular area of science that you focus on? Are you more of a generalist? What is your area?
Particularly when you're talking investigations, I have probably 3 or 4 main areas. One of them is cryptozoology, which is basically the science of unknown and mysterious animals. And I'm also the co-host of a podcast called Monster Talk, along with Blake Smith and Karen Stolzno. And so we do all sorts of monstery, sciencey type things like that. So I'm known, again, partly for the cryptozoological stuff. And I've written a book. Actually, I co-authored a book with Joe Nickel, who's a senior research fellow at CSI. And we did a book called Lake Monster Mysteries together. And my second to most recent book was called Tracking the Chupacabra, the vampire beast in fact, fiction, and folklore. And that had to do with the mysterious vampire beast, Chupacabra. And so that's sort of that end of it. I'm also known for investigating mass hysterias, just weird, mysterious things, ghost investigations, miracles, pretty much all manner of weirdness at some point or another.
You actually go out into the field, and do you actually travel around and visit places when you report on them? Is there such thing as having time or budget to do that? How does it work?
No, that's a great question. And the answer is, whenever I can, I try to do field work. And that's one thing that really distinguishes my work, I feel, from a lot of sort of armchair investigators, because I go to Loch Ness and look for the monster. I go to Puerto Rico and Nicaragua to look for a chupacabra. I go to different places and do investigations and stuff. And so instead of just sort of sitting back and saying, "Oh, that's all bullshit," or "Oh, yes, all this must be true," people like myself and you and Joe Nickel and others feel like you actually need to investigate. You can't just sit there and believe it or disbelieve it. And so, within the resources that I have, I try to go out there and do investigations. Again, because it's a nonprofit educational organization. It's not like CSI, it's not like the X-Files, where it's like, send out the black helicopters to go investigate, a weeping statue in Detroit. We can't quite pull that off. So some of the investigations are done in coordination with CSI. Other ones are done in coordination with, for example, television shows. Sometimes it's just sort of it's opportunistic. For example, a couple years back, I was in Jamaica, and I was just on vacation there, and I found out that there's a famous haunted house called Rose Hall, and there's a whole story behind. It's supposedly the most famous haunted house in the Caribbean, and I ended up doing a chapter in one of my books on the White Witch of Rose Hall, and I sort of solved that case. So again, that's just a case of where it's opportunistic. I'm there anyway. Why not spend a half a day looking for ghosts?
Wow. So how often are you actually out of the house, out of the office? Once a month? How often is this?
Not as much as I'd like. A lot of my job is very insular. Editorial work, writing, doing columns. I do columns for Discovery News and Live Science and Skeptical Inquirer and elsewhere. And so I work out of my own house. I work alone, except for my cat. Hugs to Zivan. Zivan, my cat. She comes and irritates me and keeps me from working. I don't know if you have cats or not, but that's what they do.
One cat, and she does irritate me with her allergens.
Yes. Well, we have that too. So a lot of it is really sort of very insular writing stuff, as is producing podcasts and stuff like that, which is why it's really a pleasure for me to get a chance to get out of the office and travel and go investigate and meet people and go out to the communities and meet the grassroots skeptics.
Why the monsters? Is monsters something that you just kind of happened to specialize in because other people weren't? Is it a particular interest of yours? How did the monster come about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that part of it is that I always found monsters to be more accessible than a lot of the other topics. If you're talking UFOs, they're sort of out there, they're beyond reach, they're seen by us here on Earth, but they're just so far out there. But with monsters, theoretically these things are in our lakes. They're in the woods. They're in theory within reach of any hikers or boaters or wherever else. And so I was always intrigued by this notion that there's these unknown, weird, mysterious creatures that are routinely sighted yet never proven to exist. I mean, how does that work? How can you have monsters in Lake Tahoe and not find them washing up? How can you find monsters in Lake Champlain or Lake Okanagan and they're sighted, after a couple months and years, and yet there's still not conclusive evidence? And so that always really intrigued me. And in the case of the chupacabra, there were two parts. One was that I had always had an interest in monsters, and then, again, the sort of working with Bigfoot and lake monsters. But with the case of the chupacabra, you had a well-known creature that's basically the world's second or third best-known monster after Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. It's known all around the world. There's websites. There's a handful of books. There's magazine articles and wherever else. And yet there just seemed to be no hard evidence of this. And the other thing that intrigued me about the chupacabra was that it's a vampire. Bigfoot is not a vampire. There are no stories of Bigfoot sucking blood out of people. Most lake monsters, with sort of one exception in the case of Lake Okanagan and Ogopogo, isn't known for being bloodthirsty. But the chupacabra is uniquely a vampire. And so that was part of this thing that intrigued me about this particular monster, was that you can actually trace it back to the 1700s, 1800s in Europe, and you can actually trace it back to the early vampire stories and see the thread, how it sort of goes through, and sort of reincarnated for a 20th century Puerto Rican social area. So that's what really intrigued me about that. And the reason that I was able to put so much time into the vampire, into the Chupacabra story, was because it was only about 15 years old. It was a finite monster. If you look at, you can arguably say that, for example, the Loch Ness Monster dates back to like 1938 or so, 1932. And Bigfoot being in the 50s. But the Chupacabra only had about 15 years of folklore and sightings and everything else behind it. And so it was a sort of a self-contained mystery. There are only so many reports. There's only so many eyewitnesses. There's a finite number of stuff that I had to sort through. That being said, it took about 5 years to research it, and I interviewed medical pathologists and forensic people and folklorists and everything else. So that was what intrigued me about it. And again, as I mentioned, it sort of took me to the jungles of Puerto Rico and Nicaragua. I love jungles anyway, so any chance I get to head to the jungle, I'm like, yeah, Chupacabra or not, man, I'm there. So
I have to ask you two specific monster questions now, based on what you're just talking about. I live here in California, and you mentioned Lake Tahoe. Now, I've been to Lake Tahoe many times, but I've never heard that a lake monster is there. It's a huge lake. It's the second deepest lake in North America after Crater Lake in Oregon. So what is the Lake Tahoe monster? And the other question is, you mentioned there's actually lake monsters, known for being bloodthirsty. What, are they actually killing people? Tell me about those two.
Sure, I'll start with Tahoe Tessie, as she is called. Tahoe Tessie, yeah. And it's interesting. What's that? Copycatting. That's right, the bastards is stealing our lake monsters. No, it's interesting because when you look at lake monsters, you find that there's two versions. On one hand, you have monsters that are thought to be monstrous, things that are scary and feral and wild and dangerous. On the other hand, you have monsters which are thought to be cute and cuddly and are embraced by the local culture and the local society. And so that's why, for example, when you go to Lake Champlain on the border between Vermont and New York, you find champ dolls, little fuzzy, cutesy little doll. When I was in Inverness, Scotland, the local image of Nessie is not a fearsome creature that'll rip your leg off and suck out the marrow of your bones. It's a cute little green thing, and hey, isn't this cute? And there's T-shirts and hats and all sorts of other tchotchke stuff. So it's always fascinating to me to sort of see how these myths develop in each case. In the case of Tahoe Tessie, as you pointed out, it's probably the most visited lake, certainly for recreation in the country, and you would think that by now somebody would have found the damn thing if it was there. There's actually only a handful of sightings, and most of them actually date back, as I recall, to the mid-1980s and 1990s. There's nothing really recent. And when I went there, I investigated it, and I asked locals, because you can buy T-shirts, you can buy some hats and things like that, and I said, seriously, does anybody believe this? And like, bullshit, man, go buy a T-shirt, right? So go buy a T-shirt, no comment, go buy a T-shirt. And again, that's one of the things that fascinates me is again, you have this sort of co-opting of monsters, the selective co-opting of monsters. And you were asking about the bloodthirsty monster, and yeah, actually the monster in Lake Okanagan in British Columbia is called Ogopogo, and it's really interesting. I spend like a chapter in my Lake Monster Mystery book on it, and it's interesting because it's as far as I know, it's the only or one of the only monsters that actually has a bloodthirsty story behind it. And the story goes that an earlier incarnation of Ogopogo was a creature called Nahaikt. And it's an Indian story, Nahaikt. And the story goes that the Indians, when they would cross Lake Okanagan, would actually make sacrifices to the water creature that they believed lives in the lake. And these were live sacrifices. Sometimes they would take dogs or chickens. And before they crossed the lake, they would perform a ceremony, and they would kill the dog or the chicken. They would throw it overboard, and it would sink down to the bottom, where the lake monster would accept the sacrifice, and presumably accept the sacrifice, and they would be allowed to proceed across the lake unharmed. Now, of course, there's no records of them not doing the sacrifice and it coming up and eating anybody, because that would be a fun story, and I'd like to be there for that. But that doesn't really happen. So a lot of times when people are trying to talk about the Ogopogo, they say, well, this actually goes back years and years ago to these native stories. And it's very tempting to accept that until you actually talk to people who know something about these native legends. And their answer is, bullshit. This is yes, there was this story of Naha-ikt, this water demon, but it was not thought to be an incarnate monster. It was an elemental creature. It had control over the winds. It was a deity that they worshipped in the sky and also in the water. And frankly, when you look at First Nations tales all throughout Canada, it's hard to you can hardly find a pond or a river or a stream that they didn't believe had some monster in it or some water entity in it.
Thanks to Brian Dunning and Ben Radford for a fun night. Don't forget, if you live in LA or Orange County, you can join us for Science and Suds nights at the University of California, Irvine, at the Ant Hill Pub and Grill. For more info on these and other exciting group excursions, you can check out the Facebook page for the OC Science Club.
Hi, this is Brian Dunning from the Skeptoid podcast at Skeptoid.com. For 15 years now, Dr. Bob's Trivia Quiz has been a part of Australian skeptics. Each month, the mysterious Dr. Bob comes up with questions that defy all logic and reason. Only the best of the best dare attempt to answer these brain twisters, and no, Google won't help you. Visit drbobsquiz.wordpress.com. That's DRBOBS quiz.wordpress.com to take part and to see the complete archive of Dr. Bob's Trivia Quiz. I'm Brian Dunning from Skeptoid.com.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Well, we get a lot of mail here, as you can imagine, and got a letter from Lee Harvey. Hi, Lee. How are you?
How are you?
Pretty good. Now, you had a pretty interesting experience. Now, it's very hard to get the evidence for this, but we're here with you now, and I want you to tell us what you witnessed, just so we can share the experience with you, because pretty much your word's all we got for it, but you're pretty sure you saw it. I've been having a chat with you, and I want everyone else to hear what you told me.
Well, on one glorious winter's morning back in 2010, I had the pleasure to view and observe a melanistic leopard for probably 7 or 8 minutes.
Now you're claiming that you saw a black leopard. Do you reckon you saw it for about 6 or 7 minutes? Take us through the experience.
I just spent a night at my brother's place and was driving back home, and I spent a lot of time out in the bush anyway. And I'd often gone past a side road, and I'd often go and explore these places to see what's down there, sort of thing. And decided to take this one morning, and it brought me to a abandoned dairy farm, basically, very close to a town. I'd stopped at the boundary gate to this property, and I don't go into properties. And just so happened that morning, out of an outbuilding emerged 2 young foxes. And they came out of the shed and were having a bit of a play around and chasing each other and whatnot, and just basically enjoying the morning. Then one decided to sort of break off from its partner and disappeared over a rise of a hill. That fox reappeared and was going breakneck speed back to the shed it had come out of, and was there within sort of 3-4 seconds, the distance it travelled. And the other one had picked up on that by the same stage as well, and done the exact same thing and run into the shed. Then a quite amazing thing happened. A huge black cat came over and was actually chasing it.
Now, how fast was it going, and about how large do you think the animal was?
Probably around the mark of 1.5, 1.7 body length. And with a matching tail, probably about 2/3 of that body length. Huge tail, very, very noticeable. It was going fast at the time, but what had happened when it came over the rise and seen that the foxes had outsmarted it, it slowed right down, and it actually started being very coy. It sort of pranced as it slowed down to a walk.
Had you ever seen anything like this before in the wild? Is it possible you were mistaken?
No, this was in a grass paddock. There was nothing surrounding it. It was quite open. It was very sunny. Like I said, it was only 10:30 in the morning. I study animals and plants, and I've seen most of our Australian animals, plus our feral animals as well. This was most definitely a large cat. After it had actually initially missed the foxes, and it walked over to the shed and sniffed where they'd entered the shed itself, and then circumnavigated the shed, basically walked right around it, came to the front of the shed where I could see it quite plainly, flipped over on its back and had a dust bath and sort of a bit of a claw on the ground and whatnot, shook itself off and then walked back over to where the foxes were actually sitting in the first instance. Got there, had a sniff on the ground, laid down again, cleaned its front paws, rubbed its cheeks against the grass, and sort of laid there for a few more minutes. Then got up and just trotted back over the hill, basically. Like I said, it doesn't really matter what anybody believes. I know what I saw. And it certainly threw my mind's eye into that, yes, these things are about, and I wouldn't disprove really any other story that I'll in the future read or what have you, because I've seen it with my own eyes.
And what's your personal theory? Do you think it's any kind of native cat that we've somehow missed out on, or it's some introduced thing that's got loose and managed to breed?
I would say, and there is one story about this, that they've been released in the past. Like I said, they're black leopards, so you usually find those types of animals in forested areas, and it's a recessive gene that they have, which throws them to the black. I'd say we've got small populations out in our forests, probably up and down the east coast, and that's what all the reports are saying from whatever I read. So, yeah, I'd say small populations, breeding populations. They're very secretive, so not many people would see them. However, they do tend to live near urban areas, which is pretty funny in itself, and they do that all over the world. Like I said, they're very secretive, and you wouldn't see them coming, and you certainly wouldn't hear them coming.
Now, is part of the reason that they do that because they happen to like eating foxes and dingoes if they can get it, and foxes like to hang around urban areas?
From what the keepers have told me about that thing, they'll take any other predator out of their area. It's basically competition for prey. Although they do, from what I've read, they do have a bit of a taste for canids, being dogs, foxes and the like sort of things. They tend to like to eat them. Like I said, they'll eat anything under their weight size, so they're very adaptable animals. People can believe what they want to believe. I know what I've seen, and I know for sure that, yes, they are out there now. So people can leave it to themselves, make up their own minds.
On the phone, I have Peter Bowditch from ratbags.com. And Peter, you've looked into a few of these sightings of alien big cats and unusual things in your area, which is?
Oh, I live in the Blue Mountains, and that's the centre of black cat sighting in Australia.
Have you heard any? Have you heard many in the Upper Hunter before?
No, I haven't. They tend to be mainly in what's the Gross Valley, which is the one to the sort of the north of Katoomba. More in there. Also at Lithgow, but Lithgow connects straight up to the Hunter Valley. I mean, Mudge's in the Hunter Valley. You go through Lithgow to get there. If they are in the Blue Mountains, it's not impossible for them also to be in the Hunter Valley.
Now, I sent you the raw file of my chat with Lee. What do you think?
Obviously, he saw something. I'm not saying that he's lying. I would never say that. He saw something. What he saw, I don't know. The problem with all of the evidence for these black cats or large cats is that it's always a sighting. There doesn't appear to be any other evidence that anybody's found. If there was a breeding population of large felines living in the bush in Australia, we would have found some hair. I mean, anyone's ever had a domestic cat knows that you can't avoid cat hair. We would have found feces. We would have found signs of them attacking animals. we haven't found any of these things. The only evidence tends to be sightings.
I thought that occasionally we do get farmers complaining about unusual attacks on their animals that could be caused by something like this.
It could be, but then I don't know how well these things are investigated. I think the main problem is that, well, first of all, Australia has never had any native cat population. This suggests that if we ever had cats here in Australia, this wasn't the environment for them to live in, that they've gone extinct years ago.
And has anyone given a good effort to try and find them ever in recorded time?
Oh, yes, they have. And there was even a government in Victoria that did a study in the Grampians. They went looking for them. So there's been a couple of sort of official investigations done by people like Departments of Agriculture, Primary Industry and so forth, but they've never actually found what they consider to be satisfactory evidence of the existence of these animals.
So Lee probably did the right thing. He didn't own a camera prior to this, and three days after he went out and bought one, he carries it with him at all times now.
Yeah.
Now, Peter, as someone that does investigations, you've heard the line that Lee used there, "I know what I saw." Now, does that always mean that definitely what he saw is what he saw?
Well, I think anybody that's ever been to a show put on by a magician knows that you can see things that aren't necessarily so. I think that I don't disbelieve people when they say they see things. But it's just whether what they see is what they think they see is a different question. Also, the other thing is that people will say, you skeptics don't believe this sort of stuff. It wouldn't violate any rules of science, biology, or anything else for us to find an animal in the Australian bush that we never found before. All we would say is now we know something that we didn't know before. It's just that in the case of black panthers, the evidence isn't there, or there's not sufficient evidence to be able to say, yes, these things actually exist.
So what if you have a lot of people seeing a similar thing? Doesn't that mean something?
I think it does, in which case you investigate it. And when these investigations have been done, they haven't been able to find any further evidence beyond the sightings. There's also, too, and again, there are some areas, for example, in Lithgow, there's a little bit of an industry in panther sightings as a tourist thing.
But if these things are so difficult to find, why would you be in a hurry to go there to try and see one? Because they're pretty hard to find in the first place, even if they were there.
I think it's sort of a publicity for the town type of thing. If you ask people who've never been there, what would be the number one tourist site in Scotland, they'll say Loch Ness.
But, Loch Ness is a place that if it doesn't have a monster, it should have one because it looks like it.
That's right, it should have one, yes. I think that's part of the thing too. We should have wild animals in the bush. And we actually have all these gentle animals in Australia. Now, we have kangaroos and koalas. I think we would like a bit of mythology. We would like some savage beast out there that we could fear when we walked through the bush.
Well, look, so hopefully we'll get some testable evidence in one of these days. It might even be from Lithgow, and then you'll smile will be on the other side of your face, won't it, Peter?
Oh, it certainly would. But one of the problems we got up here is one of the major proponents of the Lithgow panther also has another website where he talks about secret underground bases in the Blue Mountains that are storing military aircraft that can zoom out for world conquest or some nonsense. So there tends to be some real wackos discussing it.
Now you know, Peter, just because someone talks about secret military bases doesn't mean that there can't be alien big cats.
I suppose that's right, yes, of course, yeah. I think I would love to hear about it up here, but at the moment I think it's unlikely. I don't know what Lee saw. He certainly saw something. I just somehow or other doubt that up in the Hunter Valley or down here there's this breeding population of cats which are 1.5 times the size of Alsatian dogs.
Well, one of these days I hope we can get some evidence one way or the other. Thank you, Peter. Peter Bowditch from ratbags.com.
Thank you.
This is Carrie Poppy.
I'm Ross Blotcher.
Oh, hey, Ross.
Hey, we're from a podcast called
Oh No, Ross and Carrie.
We find out what happens when you show up and ask questions.
We've hung out with the Kabbalists.
The Mormons.
We've gone and gotten ear candles.
Gone to the Sikhs.
We show up so you don't have to.
So find out where we're going next.
We'll even have special episodes where we have famous guests like Brian Dalton from Mr. Deity.
You heard that awesome theme music? He wrote that.
You should come visit us at onopodcast.com or
facebook.com/onrack.
What the hell's OnRack, Ross?
ONRAC.
Oh no, Ross and Carrie.
That's our show.
That's so smart. Come join us.
Join us now for Drinking Skeptically in the Think Tank.
You're recording this?
Yeah.
Of course he is.
And it's a very good evening from our favourite club down the end of the street, Dr Rachael.
Hello, Richard.
Hello, you've just finished your first course, and your second course seems to be a little bowl full of chilies.
And marinated in soy sauce. Yum. It's very hot, actually.
It's very good. And it's a very good evening, bastard sheep.
G'day, g'day.
Hey, where's the little sheep?
Oh, he's sitting in the car. Should have brought him.
Oh, he's in the car?
Yeah.
Hope he
Protecting
doesn't
my
get
camera.
stolen.
Well, it's a very small but merry band here tonight in the think tank, and in fact, Dr. Rachael's just waiting on her second course. Quite a few things to get through tonight. Topics of the week, one might say. We'll start with some good news, Dr. Rachael, and that was a couple of weeks ago you reported about the government looking into cutting the subsidies for certain alternative therapies.
Yes, well, it's actually passed Parliament now. So the next step is the Chief Medical Officer of Australia will go and look at the evidence for some of the therapies that are currently under the rebate system by the Australian government. There's been a couple of conflicting reports, actually. In some of them, they mention homeopathy, iridology, aromatherapy, rolfing, some really quite sort of fringe stuff. But in some recent reports, I've seen that naturopathy is now under the microscope as well.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That one surprises me.
Yeah, because they specifically excluded chiropractic and acupuncture. But now they're putting... I've seen a couple of reports, and these haven't come directly from the government. These are journos reporting on the story. But I've started to see naturopathy popping up as one of the things they might not fund any longer.
Well, that's a broad term, though, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I suppose. But I suppose the way that they would regulate it is if you go to see a naturopath explicitly, and it doesn't matter what treatment they give you, that visit will not be rebated by the government anymore. So I think it looks like that's now in the firing line as well. It's really interesting, though, because the reaction from the cam peeps there hasn't been a reaction, really.
Well, didn't I see them complaining about... was this along the same lines that they have to now get an expert to certify their various modalities?
Yeah, well, that's something different. Right. That happened a couple of weeks before the budget announcement. So there's sort of been a bit of a government onslaught lately.
Yeah.
There has been some sort of limited responses that I've seen on places like the AVN Facebook page. But in terms of... I know that, for example, with the expert thing, the Complementary Healthcare Council's come out screaming about that. But just in general, the sort of spokespeople for CAM that I would expect would come out and blog about it or write articles about it have been conspicuous by their absence.
Yeah, when I first heard about it, I was expecting it to be in the news for weeks, and there just hasn't been any articles about it other than the initial announcement.
Well, something like 8 years ago, I'm guessing, I've got the files back home, the Minister of Health in New South Wales announced a big crackdown onto quack devices. And I was there in Parliament House when he announced it. It was all very exciting. We thought, you beauty. And unfortunately, it was all came to nothing because the alternative crowd got in there and became advisors on this panel. So maybe they're planning something.
Yeah, I don't think they can in this case because it's been assigned to the Chief Medical Officer. And as far as I haven't seen anything to indicate that he's employing advisors to look at that.
Sure.
I presume he's going to have to get somebody to help him because... I mean, it's sort of fallen under the radar, and also the details are scant as well. I haven't been able to find any details, but according to what I can see, he is going to look at literature and look for evidence.
I didn't give you the chopstick. I'll bring some chopsticks.
That's all right, Mama.
No, I'll bring some chopsticks.
Thank you.
Now, we're going to break, dear listener, because you probably just... have detected from that Rachel's dinner has arrived. What is it tonight?
Curry chicken. Yum.
Wow, that looks fabulous.
Smells really good. Can you smell it?
It does smell quite good.
Yeah. Oh, it does. Yes.
It's like Keen's mustard powder.
So curry chicken with vegetables, a nice bowl of rice and chilies in soy sauce. Dear listener, we're going to break for a second and let Dr. Rachael have a nom. And we're back. Now, I know you didn't miss anything, listener, but we watched Rachel devour almost a whole plate of curried chicken.
I'm still going.
Oh, all right. We'll let you carry on. And while we're letting you carry on, more good news, of course, for Sydney-siders with Skeptic Camp just a week away. And I can't wait to be there. I know we can get some terrific reports this time around. Sheepy, looking forward to Skeptic Camp.
Can't wait for it. It's going to be awesome. For those who don't know what Skeptic Camp is anyway, it's basically, you've got all those big skeptical conferences, you go there to hear the big names talk, but the little people, they may have some brilliant ideas as well, you just haven't heard of them. And that's the point of Skeptic Camp, for the little people, the nobodies, to come along, give their 10 minutes, be heard, become popular possibly. So every single person in attendance, if you haven't been before, pretty much have to give a talk. So make sure you get it prepared, bring it along. So yeah, that's on the 26th of May at UTS. Tickets are free. If you just go to Eventbrite and look for Skeptic Camp Sydney 2012, you should be able to find it. And there's also Cupcake Camp happening, so if you can bake what you can, bring the best thing along that you can. Have a little sign saying what it is, anything special about it, whether it's vegan or vegetarian or...
There were some great cupcakes there last year, I seem to remember. And I'm delighted to say that once again the Australian Skeptics Educational Foundation is sponsoring Skeptic Camp this year. So when you turn up, folks, you can meet a lot of the gang, a lot of the committee from Australian Skeptics. I think we'll have a table, we'll have something there, and we'll say hello to everybody. Looking forward to Skeptic Camp in Sydney. Now, let's quickly talk about a certain DVD and video that's come to our attention just lately. It's called One Answer to Cancer. Dr. H.E. and I have a copy of the video right there for your enjoyment.
I haven't seen it. You've actually watched some of it, though, haven't you?
Yes, I did actually watch some of it, but now...
So you mean to tell me that there's only one type of cancer?
Apparently so, but no, there's one answer. There's one answer. There's one answer
for the dozens, if not hundreds, of different types.
Now, this is a video which I'm sad to say is actually available on YouTube. I don't encourage people to watch it, but, well, for educational purposes, so skeptics know what they're talking about. Basically, it's saying that there's this magical cream, this substance you can smear on cancers, and wow, look at that. They sort of dissolve away and just fall off. It's just...
So does your face.
It's the Big Mac secret sauce, isn't it?
It's the secret sauce, yeah. This stuff is called black salve, is it? Dr.
Yeah, it's called black salve. It's like a cream that you can make it up yourself. There's a recipe. There'll be recipes all over the internet. I've actually held some of it and looked at it and sort of wafted the smell of it into my nose because it's very acrid, and basically what it does is it burns your skin off.
Yeah.
So people that promote it claim that it selectively selects out the cancer cells and only kills them. Yeah. It will just burn your face off.
Well, when I was watching this video, it's testimonial after testimonial after testimonial, and rants about being repressed knowledge and big pharma conspiracy. I mean, these people...
It's all over the internet and it's on YouTube. Yeah. How is that being repressed?
It's not being repressed because a certain Meryl Doria from the Australian Vaccination Network was selling this hideous video on the website, and they were told to take it down, Dr. H.
Yeah, because the TGA recently issued a warning about black salve because if you have a look at Quackwatch, Stephen Barrett's website, he's got quite a detailed entry about black salve, and he's picked some extreme cases, but it does happen that actually people have burnt holes in their faces. There's one woman whose nose burnt off.
I've seen the picture, it's horrible.
Yeah, the front of her nose and her cheeks burnt off. Someone else actually put an entire hole through their nostril because they applied it to their nostril for some sort of cancer.
Well, it's interesting because on this video there are people there saying, I had this cancer on my nose and I used this stuff.
Yeah, but the trouble is, it's basically like putting acid on your skin. It's just going to, of course it'll burn off the cancer, but it'll burn off anything else as well. I mean, it's dangerous and it's stupid. So Meryl was selling it on her website, which is interesting anyway because it's available all over the net for free.
Yeah.
So the fact that she's selling it for $20 is questionable anyway.
It's not the only free product that she sells for $30, $40.
No, in fact, a poster on the Stop the AVN page posted about 20 products just the other day that she sells that you can get for free elsewhere. So somebody pointed out that that was unfair to highlight that about what Meryl's doing, and said that Brian Dunning also gives away There Be Dragons for free, or you can buy the DVD.
Yeah.
But then someone made the point that he does that on the same page. So he gives you the option to buy it, or he gives you the option to get it for free.
Yeah,
and he points out that you're just paying for the production of the CD,
Absolutely.
of the DVD,
Yeah.
and having it sent out, whereas Meryl, she gets it from the free source and then sells it on. So she charged postage as well, so...
Yeah, anyway, so the TGA told her that she had to stop selling it. And of course she went mental and said that was repression of her rights, and, you know, the government, the big government is, you know, coming down on free speech, etc., etc.
Oh, she really had a rant about it.
Oh, she absolutely did. And she blamed Australian Skeptics and SAVN. And I'm just like to point out that apparently the complaint was anonymous. So there's no indication who actually put a complaint in to the TGA about her selling it.
Wasn't me. I don't know.
Well, no, it wasn't me. I don't know if it was Sheepy.
I didn't even know about this.
But she then proceeded to advertise it for sale on her Facebook page.
Well, I've got the link right here, and Mochuck, our friend Mochuck, in fact, tweeted this only a little while ago. And this is a posting by the Australian Vaccination Network. If anyone would like to buy one of the last copies of the DVD, One Answer to Cancer, that the AVN has in stock, please call us on yada 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 during business hours. The TGA can stop us from listing it on our website, but they haven't yet stopped us from carrying it or selling it, full stop. Book burning anyone? Meryl Dorey.
Well,
she does know about Godwin's law, right?
I don't know. She breaks it all the time, or invokes it all the time. But there's now a rumour going around Twitter that, in fact, she's charging $20 for it and $5 postage, and there's a rumour that she's actually just sending people a link to the YouTube.
Well,
it's just a rumour.
Just a rumour.
I don't know if it's true. Yeah, but she's gone a little bit cranky about that, and saying that natural therapists are coming under fire from the government, from everywhere. And in fact, she's having a meeting, I think next Tuesday or Wednesday, where she's going to have a conference call with whoever's interested to formulate a plan to put together a lobby group to lobby the government because they're taking away her rights. And she commented about the private health rebates and said the government's taking away our access to natural therapies. Well, the thing is, Meryl is a little bit like a cult leader in a way, because what she likes to do is scaremonger her bunch of acolytes or followers into a frenzy such that they get to a point where then she can then say, give me some money. It's a pattern that she does every time. So, in fact, she misrepresented that, because the government is not stopping people from accessing natural therapies. You'll still be able to go to your homeopath and your iridologist and your rolfer, but you just won't get money back from the government. Yeah. No one's stopping you, no one's banning it. But of course, her followers don't bother to do their own research in most cases. So now they're all being told that Australians won't have access to natural therapies anymore. So she's having some sort of conference call next week to work something out. And I wouldn't be surprised if, as a result of that, she comes out and says, I need donations so I can go to Canberra to meet with the health minister. I've got to tell you a story, though, Richard, which this is just so funny. It's another example of her whipping up her followers into a frenzy. It was the budget came out last Tuesday. There was some discussion about how there used to be we currently in this country, in some states, we have a free booster for whooping cough for parents and carers.
Yep.
Because we're in an epidemic in most of the country, if you're a carer or a new parent, or you're going to be around young babies that are not fully vaccinated, the government would give you a free booster shot for adults. Now, they've decided recently, or at least Victoria has decided recently, that they're not going to fund that after July 2012. So there was a whole lot of discussion about whether that was a good idea. In fact, it turns out that we think they may have jumped the gun, because the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee, who are the people that advise on health interventions, found some evidence to suggest that they weren't sure if it was economically viable, but the government interpreted that as it doesn't work.
Oh.
So before they'd actually really thought about it and looked at the evidence properly, they said, we don't think it works, so we're stopping it altogether. So in fact, there's a lot of discussion now going on between health professionals and the government about whether that was the right decision. But aside from that, the health minister came out on that day and was talking about that particular decision, and also that the government is now linking family benefit payments to whether your children are going to be fully immunised. So in order to get $2,000 from the government, you have to demonstrate that your kids are fully immunised. So Merrill went mental because one of the things that the health minister didn't mention was that if you fill out a conscientious objector form, you can still get that money anyway. Now, probably the reason that Tanya Plibersek didn't mention that is because only about 2% of parents identify as conscientious objectors. She was making a speech immediately after the federal budget where she had a lot on her plate, and she probably isn't interested in advertising the fact that parents can get the money for nothing. It's probably not something that she wants to highlight.
Yeah.
In any case, Merrill went mental and started stirring up her acolytes, saying that because she didn't mention it, therefore the government's cutting it. Therefore, there'll be no more conscientious objections available. So apparently, according to her Facebook page, she immediately rang the minister's office. She couldn't get through to the minister. I wonder why. The day after the federal budget. She was then put through to someone else's office where she harassed the staff there. They said that Tanya Plibersek would get back to her when she had time. That wasn't good enough, so she wrote a letter including the phrase, "It's my will," which she believes means that they have to respond immediately. When they hadn't responded by the close of business that day, she called again. She called 3 times, to the point of which reportedly one of the staff said that she was verbaled, which I think means harassed or abused verbally.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Because Merrill wouldn't accept that the health minister would get back to her in due time. She demanded that she get back to her that day. And so the funny thing is, I mean, there's a couple of points to make about this, I think. There's never been any discussion that the conscientious objector clause will be removed. Never. It's never been discussed. Yeah. She is simply whipping up her followers so that they start panicking, so then she can say, I need money to go and see the health minister in Canberra. And secondly, she's always going on about how skeptics harass government departments and waste their time with vexatious complaints. If there's any example of harassing a government department and wasting their time, it's with that. There's never any discussion that the CO would be off the table. And she harassed Tanya Plibersek's staff, she harassed Jenny Macklin's staff, because she couldn't get a response 24 hours after the budget was announced. Just finally, I haven't had a chance to look at this yet, but there's a special edition of the journal called Vaccine out this month, which is specifically about immunisation decisions and attitudes as a result of the internet. So it's a whole bunch of articles on that. Julie Leiska's written at least one about MMR. So I'm really keen to get a copy of that and have a look at some analysis by, people with qualifications and experience when it comes to vaccination, and about how the internet has affected the way people make decisions now. I think it'll be really interesting because, I've talked about this a lot, and I give talks about this, about the amount of bullshit that's out there on the internet. And, still the AVN is coming up the second hit in Australia on Google. So it's a problem.
I had a very nasty letter from somebody who believes in applied kinesiology, because if you Google applied kinesiology...
Oh, no. Were you the first hit?
No, I Googled it the other day and I come up quite high. The video that you took part in that video a couple of years back, applied kinesiology, how it's done, where you pulled the words out of the hat and we showed the balance tricks. Yeah. And this guy said to me, "This isn't real applied kinesiology. No, they don't do this." And I said, "Look at all the videos on the right," because when you're in the comments on YouTube, the videos are on the right, and there's all these other people saying, "This is applied kinesiology," and they're all doing the same arm tricks. Oh dear. And it's something akin to what we're talking about, which is odd practices, is chiropractic. Sheepy, you've got some information there.
Yeah, this is something that Tim Farley tweeted the other day.
Tim Farley?
Just interviewed the other week. Edzard Ernst over in the UK, who's the world's only professor of complementary medicine, has done a meta-study into chiropractic. what he's found is that out of 60 randomised controlled trials of chiropractic carried out between January 2000 and July 2001, 29 of those 60 studies failed to mention any adverse effects at all as part of it. And of the 31 that remained that did mention adverse effects, 16 of those were out after the trial. It wasn't actually during the trial that any of the adverse effects were reported. Right. So basically what they've been doing during these trials is just ignoring any bad side effects. He's going, shh, that didn't actually happen. And when they did mention them, they waited until after the study period had completed before they mentioned
by the way,
any of the bad things that went on.
Good heavens.
The basic topic of this was that a lot of chiropractic injuries may go very highly underreported.
So this is only just out, was it?
Yes, this has only come out a couple of days ago on May 14th, this information.
I had an argument with somebody on Twitter the other day. This guy just out of the blue just sent me a tweet about, this is so funny, can I just share this story?
Go on.
Do we have time?
Yeah, go on. Dr. H, will make time.
You know, there's a particular article from the Daily Fail that keeps getting circulated every couple of years as new information, and it's about MMR and autism. Right. And so every time it comes up again, it goes viral with the anti-vaxxers, and they send it to all of the high-profile vaccine people on Twitter, apparently, which I'm one, to say, look, sucked in, MMR causes autism. Now, it's actually an article from 2004, I think, or 2006. But the way the Daily Fail website is set up is it's time-stamped at the top with the current date. So if you don't look properly, it looks like it's a current article. Oh. And usually this happens. There's a cycle. It's already happened about 3 times since I've been active. And it goes around, and then everyone thinks it's new, and then eventually they go, oh, it's not. So anyway, something very similar happened 2 Mondays ago with an article written on the highly erudite naturalnews.com.
Oh, no.
And they wrote about the monkey study. Now, the monkey study is the famous... It was one of Wakefield's last studies. In fact, he's not on the paper because it was during his downfall. But his collaborator, Laura Hewitson, who worked at Thoughtful House, where he was subsequently kicked out from, she did a study where they tried to recreate the childhood immunisation schedule in the States in baby macaques, and then showed that there was neurological damage, so they said therefore. But one of the things that they did do, which was really curious, was they put thimerosal back into the vaccines when it's been taken out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay.
So it was a trashy piece of science. It was actually published in 2010 from an abstract from 2008. Now, 2 weeks ago it was written up on naturalnews.com, and this guy tweeted it to me and said, nah. And I wrote back and said, oh yeah, you're mistaken, like it's really old. And he went silent after that, and then came back again and said, I just want to have a discussion and all this. And I'm like, there's nothing to discuss, mate. You sent me an article that's wrong and old. It's been debunked. Here's the link that shows it's full of shit. It's Wakefield, it's Hewitson, it's da-da-da-da-da. But he decided he wanted to engage. Anyway, so he sent me a link to some acupuncture stuff and said, look, here's a video on YouTube of the American Army using acupuncture in Afghanistan. Therefore, it works. And I went, okay. I said, first of all, that's not evidence. Second of all, just because the Army uses it doesn't mean it works.
Yeah.
Anyway, we had this little discussion for a little while, and then eventually he said, well, you just don't know. He said, I'm surprised you don't open your mind and you're not curious about acupuncture. And I very flippantly wrote back and said, well, actually, I do, and I have, and I've published, and sent him a link to an article I published with Edzard Ernst a few months ago, which is a review of acupuncture. Surprisingly, that didn't shut him up. He said, that's not good enough because you have to see it with your own eyes.
No, it's not good enough because you don't agree with me.
Yeah. He said it's not good enough to review other people's data. You have to see it with your own eyes before you can really know what's going on. I just went, no, that's not how science works. So...
It's like saying, I really don't think the South Pole's cold. I better go there to find out.
Well, I know. And the thing is, I said to him, he said, oh, but in China, it works. And I said, well, it's interesting you should say that because we reviewed, I think for our review, we had something like 36 studies, or maybe less, but we actually narrowed that down from hundreds of studies. And what we found was these were all NCAM-funded studies, the National Centre for Complementary Alternative Medicine in the US. We found that studies that were positive tend to come from China, and when they were repeated in the rest of the world, they were negative.
Yeah.
So it appears that there's a bias in acupuncture studies in China. Now, that wouldn't really surprise anyone, I wouldn't think, because it's culturally ingrained in their society. It's used everywhere. It's used in emergency rooms over there. I don't think if your leg's fallen off, but they do use it. So I wasn't particularly surprised to see that there was a bias towards positive results in China versus the rest of the world. So his interpretation of that was, no, you're biased. I said, no.
At what stage did you stop talking to this
Well, I told him to piss off a couple of times, but then he kept coming back, and he's now said that he wants to set up a forum that's better for discussion than Twitter, and I said, well, good luck with that. I'm not interested. But I was then told that it was my bias that caused the Chinese studies to be negative elsewhere. And I'm like, no, if you look at the studies, and he said, but it works. I said, look, he sent me a newspaper article that was translated from Chinese. Do you remember that BBC clip that was turned out to be inaccurately reported, where they did open heart surgery on someone and they said it was only acupuncture,
Yes.
but apparently they did actually get anaesthetic?
Yes.
He sent me that. He sent me 2 videos of the army doing acupuncture in Afghanistan, and I said, you know what, here's the difference, mate. I've read 29 pieces of literature on acupuncture. You've sent me 2 newspaper articles and 2 videos. Who do you think's got more information here? But I was wrong because I didn't have the same answer as him.
Yes,
you know?
that's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my story.
Thank you, Dr.
Sorry.
Rachael.
I just thought it was funny.
I guess it is if you look at it that way. We might round off the think tank on that funny note. I think I need a little bit of homeopathy and acupuncture at the moment myself, because I'm still on the tail end of the cold. Yeah, I had it last week. It's almost gone. Maybe it's the lack of homeopathy and acupuncture that's helped it get better.
Maybe you should go on to Stop Homeopathy Plus Facebook page, because Monica Milker, who's a homeopath from Australia, she's on there at the moment arguing with people and telling them to bend over and take it and stuff like that. She's very professional. She was a homeopath who was done by Today Tonight because she was selling what she calls tonics, which turned out to be highly diluted brandy or scotch or something. And 14 patients are now suing her because she gave them bacterial infections from injecting them with stuff.
Oh dear.
So go and ask her for some advice.
Oh, she was the person who was using the same needle in multiple people, wasn't she? Without disinfecting or
Well,
cleaning
yeah,
at all.
she claims that it wasn't her, it was her staff or something. But yeah. And every time we post that news article about her being sued and being called out in South Australian Parliament, she says that it's a witch hunt or some shit like that.
Stop smirking, Dr. Rachael. Anyway, as you finish the very last bits of your curried chicken, I'd like to thank you for coming along tonight to the think tank.
It's been fun. Thank you.
She says, nodding. And Bastard Sheep, thank you.
Thank you.
And until our next think tank, and we might see if we can drag a few more people along, it's cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone this week with all sorts of strange creatures and cats and anti-vaccinations and all sorts of things. A few notes. Now, last week we interviewed the lovely Julie Ladder about her experiences being a veterinary student, and I gave you the wrong URL for her blog. Only a little bit wrong. I mean, most people found it anyway. Instead of an M, I said an N. Anyway, the real location for her blog is mydvmvacation.blogspot.com. Check out the blog of Julie Ladder. And thanks once again, Julie, for talking to the Skeptic Zone last week. Actually, we've had some comments come back from that, so that's really great. What's worth a visit also is the website of Australian Skeptics, www.skeptics.com.au. Not Skeptics with a K, that's the other podcast from the UK with those crazy guys. Skeptics.com.au, and click on the link for the journal, The Skeptic it's called, the Journal of Australian Skeptics since 1981. You can subscribe online and have the Skeptic delivered to you via email, which is half price, only about $22 a year. Worth checking out, a great journal, which I contribute to from time to time. Before I ride off into the sunset, well, it's a nice sunny day. Thank you to all those people who subscribe. Of course, thank you to all those people who subscribe. It's because of you the show keeps going. You can subscribe by visiting www.skepticzone.tv. In the coming weeks, I hope to bring you more news of another test that the Australian Skeptics hope to conduct with another power band, magic band type wristband. Some people have contacted us. I can't say any more right now, but stay tuned. Well, I'm off to read my issue of the Skeptic magazine, see what we've been up to here on Australian Skeptics. And I hope for the pleasure of your company, no matter what you're doing, if you're doing the dishes or jogging, hello to all those people jogging right now, or riding your bike. Hello to all those bike riders, or doing the dishes, or commuting, stuck on that damn train yet again, or driving in your car listening to the Skeptic Zone. This is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.